Welcome to Human Potential at Work, the show where we explore social impact, inclusion, and empowerment of everyone, including persons with disabilities. Your host is Debra Ruh, CEO of Ruh Global Impact and co-founder and chairwoman of Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring billions of voices of persons with disabilities together. To join the global community and to donate to the cause, visit billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org. And now, on to the episode.
Hello, everyone. My name is Debra Ruh, and this is Human Potential at Work. And today I have a guest on. Her name is Kim Polman. And her work is new to me, but I've been really looking at her work and delving into it. And I just really think y'all need to know about this woman, because I believe that if we follow her plan, which sounds funny, but certainly I just think it's a really good plan for moving forward. And so very excited about sharing my guest, Kim Polman, today. I'll tell you a little bit more about her, but let me just tell you a little bit more about me. I am the CEO of Ruh Global Impact. We work with corporations and organizations and governments to include people with disabilities. I'm also the co-founder and the executive chair of Billion Strong, the world's first identity organization for people with lived experiences with disabilities, and quite frankly, any other human being on the planet that really wants to make sure the planet works for all of us and this beautiful living planet that we're on and everybody else, all the mammals and reptiles and everything. And of course, I'm very interested in the Sustainable Development Goals, which is another reason why I have Kim Polman on today. But a quick visual description of myself for those of you that might not be able to see, or you're listening to this as a podcast. I'm a mature woman. I'm light-skinned. I have today gray, white, and purple hair with some blue streaks, and I have a green dress. And Kim, thank you for coming on the program. I'm going to do a quick introduction. And Kim is one of the co-founders of Reboot the Future. She's a co-author of Imaginal Cells, Visions of Transformation. And that, what she's talking about there, I think is so interesting. I highly recommend this book. Her second book is The Golden Rules, Values for a Life Economy. And that's what we're going to talk about a lot today. She also, along with her amazing husband, and I believe her son, created the Kilimanjaro Blind Trust. William Howard Taft Medical Award was given to her by the University of Cincinnati, and that was for notable achievement. Sorry, I'm almost done bragging about you. I could go on. Anyway, she's also an Aspen Institute fellow. She's really making a difference in the world and believes that we all can do it. We all can help. Kim, thank you for that long introduction I had to give about you, but welcome to the program.
It was way too long, but thank you very much. And since you've described yourself, I'll do that too. So I'm also a mature woman. I like that description. I have short, light colored hair and light skin. I'm wearing a blue sweater.
Yes. And Kim, thank you for coming on the program. I know sometimes I hate listening to my bio because I appreciate it, but it's just embarrassing. I just want to jump right in with you and say, quote, embracing the golden rule as a starting point to really help us get our hands around some of this really big stuff that's happening, climate change and what obligations do these corporations have to society? These are the big conversations you're having. And maybe even the first place to start would be, what is the golden rule? I'm going to assume a lot of people know what the golden rule is, but it might be more of a Western term, maybe. I'm not sure.
Actually, it's known in America as the Golden Rule, but of course, the principle itself is universal, and both historically but also geographically. We have a modern version of it at Reboot the Future, which is treat others and the planet as you would wish to be treated. We think that, up until now, the Golden Rule has all been applied mostly to human interactions, but we really have to be conscious of how we treat all life. And mankind has been quite arrogant throughout its history, particularly recent history, thinking that we are above all the rest of life on Earth. But in fact, more and more people are becoming aware that we are really an integral part of nature. And we are equal. Everyone, every living being has a right to exist. We need to be a bit more humble as the species. And that's what the Golden Rule helps us remember.
I agree. I think I like your work so much because you are having the hard conversations. For example, you're not just up there saying, hey, let's do the golden rule. Come on, let's be kind to each other. You're actually having the kind of conversations. For example, I heard on a podcast this morning where you were saying, if you personally do not want to be a slave, because it's really bad to be a slave, we all know, then why would you, as an executive or a leader in a company, want to work with suppliers that are enslaving people? So I just wanted to tell the audience, yes, we're talking about some really beautiful, light, fun things, but we're saying, or Kim's saying, apply that rule to everything. We are on a living planet. We are a part of it. We're not the smartest of anything. We're a part of it. So that part just always freaks me out, that man thinks, oh, there's something moving, let me go kill it. I'm generalizing, but humans, I should say. But so you're not just having some fun little conversations about, Kim, why don't you smile and make the day brighter? Which, by the way, will make your day brighter. But you're having these conversations in a really pretty big way. So I was just wondering if you would explore that a little bit and tell us why.
Sure. The purpose of the first book, Imaginal Cells, Visions of Transformation, was really to show that the golden rule is applicable to the big issues of the world. We published that right after the SDGs came out, and they're very technical, the Sustainable Development Goals, which were approved by the UN in 2015. There's 17 of them for anyone who doesn't know about them, and there's something like 170 further explanations of the 17. And the purpose was to show that the golden rule really is the driving force. It's the motivation behind all of these. And if we could just reduce all of them to this very simple principle that is known worldwide, but forgotten, but it is the basic core of being human, and then it's the basic core of all religions, actually, then we can just more naturally solve these issues. One of my favorite stories from the book is an article that is talking about the deep sea fishing and these big, huge ships that have the big, huge nets that drag along the bottom of the ocean and just destroy everything. And sadly, this is still going on. But I like to tell people, ask people, what if a big, giant helicopter had a big net like that and just dragged through your village and picked up everything, pulled out a few lampposts because that's what he wanted, and then dropped everything else in a crumble down to the ground, just completely destroyed? And that is exactly what those sort of trawling fishing nets do. So when you put it that way, you have to scratch your head and think, whoa, okay, is that what it really means, this kind of fishing? So, we have a responsibility as the owner of that fishing company to think of a more sustainable way of fishing. So you're only taking what you really need. Second of all, if you're an investor, you only invest in companies that are doing the right kind of fishing. And then thirdly, as a consumer, we buy fish that are sustainably raised. It's very hard. All three of those are very hard because there's huge amounts of pressure on all of those three areas. We're not going to save the oceans unless we change these kinds of things. So that's a typical example of the practicality of the golden rule to real issues. You mentioned slavery. That is so clearly clear. Why none of us want to be slaves. So how can we possibly justify treating other human beings in that way?
And
Yeah.
Excuse me, there's a little delay. I didn't mean to step on you, but I heard, and this is an old statistic, but I heard a few years ago, that the UN knew there was over 1 million people that were enslaved. And probably those numbers are low because we don't have all of that data as society. So this is still real.
Totally.
Yeah, it's funny as we talk about this because I'm somebody that I really care about the planet. Obviously, I love nature. When I get a little freaked out by other humans or even myself, what I do is I go out into nature. That's the only way I know to calm Let me say it, this is the most effective way for me to calm down. And taking care of our living planet just makes so much sense to me. But at the same time, Kim, I think a lot of us are very confused. And I'm not saying you have all these answers, by the way. If you do, that's great. But I don't believe you're going to have the answer to this one. But just things like, I remember a friend introducing me to recycling when I was younger, and she was so obsessive about it. It was like, oh no, she would go in the garbage and pick a glass bottle out. And I remember thinking at the time as I became that person myself. And then I, of course, would hear news articles of where they're taking these recycling that I did so carefully and just throwing them into the dump. They're just throwing them in with everything else. And so I think a lot of times we don't even know what to do. We don't even know what to do. I think, and I'll just give you an example. An employee of mine who is blind, and she lives in the Philippines, and it's in a very tough situation. And she was just so freaked out and scared and upset. And she's I don't even know what to do. And she was panicking. I said, I think one of the best things you can do is find somebody to help. Go find somebody to help. Even if you just smile at them because they look down, just for a second, do something to help one other person or an animal or planet. And she did. And she said, wow, it made me feel so much better. And I know that before we came on air, we were talking about when we do something positive for another human, for the planet, for anything, for a little tiny bug that you saved instead of stepping on it. And I'm not saying you can't step on the bugs, but what happens, Kim? What happens when we do this?
There's a lot of things that happen, and that are so basic to the core of being human. We are a mammal, and as mammals, we give birth, as all mammals do, to babies that are helpless. And we, like other species, have to nurture our babies through the right food and through training so that they can behave in the right way to live in their societies. There's a beautiful book by Carl Sagan called, I think it's called Becoming Wild. And he goes through a bird, the sea animal, which is a whale, and a land animal, which is one, and it's not chimpanzees, one of those. But he explains how exactly the same way that humans do teach their babies how to become who they need to be. And so we're just part of that whole system. And so one of the things is developing empathy. And when the baby is loved and cared for, that is how they learned when they grow up to love and care. And it is so innate within us that it is the same all over the world for all of human beings. Religious leaders throughout history, there are prophets, all of our famous prophets, whether it be Confucius or Buddha, Muhammad, Jesus, the Greek philosophers, just the Jain, so many of these prophets, they've all preached this is the most important core of their religion. It gets forgotten in dogma, which is the really sad thing, but it is at the core. And why? Because it is so inherent to us. There's a lot of temptations and a lot of pressures on us, and we forget it. Mm-hmm. So we have to be reminded of it as adults. We learn it. Most of us learn it as children. We have parents who teach us not to hit someone, either their sibling or somebody in the streets. Don't hit them because you don't like to be hit. We learn that as children, but we forget it in the struggles of daily life. And we need to remember it because it is so basic and so core and drives really all of our other values. And one of the other things I want to say about the Golden Rule is that for us, it has 3 requirements to really live it fully. Compassion and empathy are somewhat limited in their definitions, but the Golden Rule takes them a step farther. So it requires you to listen, because we do share a common set of values, but sometimes our needs are different. And so we do need to listen to someone. And then second of all, sometimes it really takes a lot of courage to step away from either corporate culture or a family value or even a religious value. Not all religions are really living up to their main purpose, which is to help humans love more. So it takes courage. And then the third thing is action. It does require action because there are many versions of the golden rule, but it's always about doing or don't do or treat or don't treat. So it's always about action. Whereas empathy is beautiful and it is about the listening part of it, but not necessarily the action part
Right.
of it. So, for example, I live in London and there's a lot of homeless people here on the street. Unfortunately, there are a lot of organizations that are trying to help them, but we walk past them
I
all the
know.
time.
No, and it's so hard.
We can't stop and help them all. That's just an impossible thing to ask of anyone. But we can help in some way, support these organizations. Talk to the one that lives closest to you that you pass all the time. Treat them like a human being. Here they sell, a lot of them sell the big issue. Buy the big issue. Buy several of them when they come out on Mondays to support several of them. It's a really important activity. So there's a lot of things that can do, but you can't help all of them. That's absolutely understood.
Yes, and I'm one of those people that I do support the shelters and the efforts, but I really am bad if I have cash. And my son always scolds me about it, Mom. But I just see you, human being in trouble, and I know sometimes there's blah blah blah. And I think that's a good point because sometimes, and we've talked about this a little bit. It's like right now it feels I, like so many, have walked some really tough paths. Still am, like a lot of human beings. I think there are many human beings that are walking it much harder, that aren't in a beautiful developed country like the United States, that got it even much worse. But it's a lot. I am finding a lot of the stuff that I believed, I just accepted truths are not true. And I think a lot of us in society are realizing that, and I know I'm sticking my head up and going, oh, but I thought that was a solid rule. Oh, okay. So in some ways, it feels a little like I'm living on shifting sands. And I also want to say this to you, Kim, as I know you live in London and you've traveled the world, but you're an American. You grew up in America here like I do. And one thing I see that sometimes worry that in America, we're not joining enough. The most of us, I know we have leaders doing it, aren't really understanding what happens outside our borders. And I think a lot of people get focused on their own home, but I worry as our beautiful country with so much to offer the world that many people don't even know what the sustainable development goals are in the United States, many leaders. And I think that's shifting. And I think based on work like you and your husband are doing and many other leaders, there's a lot of good happening. There's a lot of leaders that have a lot of money that are making a difference. I just want to remind the audience. And we have to shift and make sure we're following those people and helping them. But I was just wondering what advice you would have for your fellow Americans, even though now you live in London.
Oh, I don't think that what you're talking about is unusual. You live locally and you need to be sure that there's plenty to do locally. And even though I am a global traveler, I've lived in many different countries for 4.5 decades. So I have a very broad perspective, but I always tell my husband, who works at a hugely global level, you need to work at the local level. Nothing happens globally unless it happens locally. So we need the committed people on the ground doing the local work. Absolutely. I think if you're one who's just very passive, sitting back and not doing anything, that's unfortunate. You're missing an opportunity to contribute to the progress of humanity, of your village, of your community, whatever. But no, I wouldn't apologize for that. Yeah. And everybody is ultimately responsible for their own backyard, their own front yard. I did want to go to one point back to the golden rule. You had asked me originally to speak on how that relates to inclusion and
Right.
social justice. And maybe it's clear by now that it totally does.
Yeah.
It's a really simple question. Just put yourself in someone else's shoes. It's as simple as that. Just try to imagine what it is like to be inhibited in some way from being able to do something. And sometimes it just takes a little thing to help. Sometimes it takes a lot to help. But whatever we can do to make it easier for people who are having a tough time and who have not been included in the past, we all need to make that effort to do that. If I could also mention my other book, Values for Life Economy, you talked about going out into nature and how important that is for you. And for us, the golden rule really does include the planet, that we include all life, taking care of all life in its diverse forms in humanity, but also the diverse forms of animals and plants. The book was a result of conversations that we were holding online during COVID with a wide group of people in the arts or education, finance, environmental people. I'm trying to think, young people. And we were trying to capture what everybody was thinking about during that time. We've nearly forgotten about it by now.
I know.
There's like this void of 2 years that everybody kind of, we got through, most of us got through it, but we just have moved on. Yeah. But there were valuable thoughts, thinking, there was valuable thinking going on at the time. And that's what this book captures. We synthesized a lot of the ideas from a lot of people into a set of 10 values. And we call it life economy. I just wanted to point this out because the word life economy is a great term for what the kind of economic system, social system. First, it really includes everything where all life is valued. And it's in opposite to the death economy. This word was coined by John Perkins, who has spent a whole life living the extractive, exploitative, but then later on moved towards supporting all of life and made a real about face, realizing the damage that he was doing in that death economy of exploiting, extracting, and abusive, greedy behavior. Not so much at his own individual level, although he was living it, but he was representing governments and corporations, and it was ultimately very self-seeking, and realized the damage that was happening in, for example, the rainforest. It's so well known now what has been happening there, and it still goes on, sadly enough. But the life economies, yeah, here's the book.
Thank you. Thank you. Yes, because I have ordered it. So I'm really looking forward to it. It's called the Golden Rule, Values for a Life Economy. And the reason why I ordered it is because right now I'm following anybody that's trying to make a difference, that is looking at the problems together. I'll give a quote that you said: collaboration is the predecessor to change. And I so agree. And we're adaptable human beings and we can help, but we have to do it together. So I know I promised to only keep you on about 30 minutes. We have about 5 minutes left. Tell us what we can do, Kim. Tell us how we can get engaged. I really recommend to the audience, please buy her books. She didn't talk, I'm hoping she will just a minute, about why her first book is called The Imaginal Cells, Visions of Transformation. Because as she just mentioned, that pandemic, I lost my husband and two of my brothers during that time. So people are traumatized more than ever before. But what can we do when we were being pressured so much? How can we use that to make the world a better place? So I was just wondering if you'd talk about a little bit about why your book is called Imaginal Cells, and then give the audience some advice of how do we help? What more can we do? Just the big question, sorry.
The imaginal cell is the cell that is in the caterpillar, innate but dormant, that holds the vision of the butterfly. And there's a great, fantastic metaphor here that gives hope. The caterpillar represents this death economy that I mentioned and gorgeous until it can't eat anymore. Stops, goes into his cocoon. He breaks down, and then there's this chaos inside this cocoon. And that activates these imaginal cells. Now, the imaginal cells have different identities. One's the eye, the mouth, the hair, the wings, the color, all of that. So they have different purposes. Just like we humans come out, we have different talents and different purposes. So but the caterpillar doesn't like this new cell. The old way does not like this new way, and starts eating and attacking it. But that makes the imaginal cells cluster and be strong. They find each other because they emit a common frequency. And that ultimately makes them strong enough to withstand the caterpillar who gives up and goes away. So those of us who are living this common frequency, which is for us the golden rule, we find each other, which I've been doing for the last 6 years. I've been finding wonderful, beautiful people, as I think you have as well, Debra.
Yeah.
And so that out comes the beautiful butterfly, and out will come this beautiful world that we want, this life economy. So that's the story of hope, that this moment of chaos is where we are right now. And the more of us that can live this golden rule, basically, what is that? That can be said in one word, which is love. It's a word that is not used in business and at the government and in organizations, but every now and then I hear it more and more. So it's hopeful. Without love, what are we here for? And so, in answer to your question, what can we do? Just love more. Look for more and more opportunities to love, and let your light shine. I know that's a real common thing to think about, but I think it's absolutely true. Just as you're saying, smile and let your love radiate from you and be attracted. There's a bit of selfishness in here. I always think it starts with me. I need to be the one that loves first, and then I get love back. It's just a very basic rule of life. So that's how I love it.
And I just want to say to the audience, even though Kim's just a regular old person, but what her and her husband, Paul Polman, are doing to make sure we take care of our earth and all of us and all of the other inhabitants are very powerful. So if you haven't seen my interview with Paul, even though there's a ton of interviews out there with this really amazing man that Kim is married to, and the thing I love about these two is they're doing it together. What can we do together as partners? Remember, collaboration. So we collaborate with each other. We collaborate with, like you said, I have so many beautiful souls coming in my life. And when I was interviewing Paul, Kim, he was using some of your work as an example. So then I'm like, I want to talk to her. I want to talk to the woman that's making all this difference. So I just want to thank you for what you're doing. And I know it's embarrassing, but at the same time, I want to thank every single person that's making a difference in another person's life and including themselves, because it's hard right now. But we can do it. We can do it. I also am going to do a little, just because I have it sitting here. If you haven't looked at the 2023 Net Positive Employee Barometer that was done by, I'm going to forget the name, by Paul Polman. What is the new company that did that report? The Net Positive. Net.
Oh, there's Net Positive.
It's the Net
Positive.
Right. Yeah. So check it out, and you can go to the interview, but I would just suggest check out Paul's work, check out Kim's work. If you don't know how to move forward, how to help, because we all got to do it. We're adaptable. We can do it. Please check out their work. They're influencing major leaders all over the world, and it makes sense, and it is a way forward. So I would highly recommend that you consider checking out Kim, Polman's work. And Kim, let me give you the final word.
My organization is Reboot the Future, and we're.org. So you can find more information and films and things that we've created that help if you want to use any of that for sharing it with your connections. Fantastic. And thank you, Debra, for what you do, promoting all of the work that these amazing people do that you meet all the time. So thank you for inviting me. And thank you for your questions, and I wish you well.
Yes, and I think we've got this. So once again, to check out Kim, go to Reboot the Future and check out her 2 books, Imaginal Cells, which is still Visions of Transformation, still very relevant, very interesting stories in there. And then Golden Rule, Values for a Life Economy. So thanks to the audience. Thank you, Kim, very much. And we'll see you next time. Bye, everyone.
Thank you.
You've been listening to Human Potential at Work. To learn more about Ruh Global Impact, visit ruhglobal.com. And to learn more about Billion Strong, an identity and empowerment organization designed to bring the billions of voices of persons with disabilities together, you can join the global community and donate at billion-strong.org. That's billion-strong.org.